Well, welcome to the third in a series of Communique. Communique, our video blog. Communique is the idea of communicating, I think, an important piece of information. I get to communicate it to you, and you are invited to communicate this information onward to your friends, to your family, to your community leaders, to whoever you like. Well, we're standing here today at our synagogue in Efrat. This synagogue is called Mishkan Sipora, and it's a very, very beautiful synagogue. We're standing in front of the Ark of the Torah. Inside here are several Torah scrolls. They're kept under under lock and key, so we can't actually open them at this point in time. It's a very, very lovely synagogue here in Efrat, which is in the Judean hills, just south of Jerusalem, about 15 minutes drive south of Jerusalem. Well, yesterday in the news, something very important happened, and that was the unveiling of a new building at Icholov Hospital. That's a hospital in the central part of Israel, in Tel-Aviv. And what's interesting about this particular new building is that it is the largest bomb shelter in Israel. This is an emergency ward of the Icholov Hospital, and it is 14 floors above ground and another 4 floors below ground, and it will be able to hold between 700 to 1,000 emergency beds. And what's really important about this facility is that it will be able to withstand attacks from conventional, chemical, and biological warfare. What's interesting is that this facility, which will, during non-wartime, will be used for short-term parking. See, we're always thinking. It has already been prepared for water pipes, oxygen, electricity, ventilation, and enough fuel for generators to actually last 1 full week with being totally cut off from the electric grid in case of an attack, which is always a very serious problem. This building comes at a very steep price tag at $110 million, and half of that money has actually been donated by a private donor, Sami Ofer, who's a very well-known billionaire. And this is a private donation that is making this very special hospital bomb shelter possible. So it's very, it's looking forward to visiting it and seeing what that looks like. And as I was thinking and talking with my wife Leah about what the implications of this shelter are all about, we talked about the idea that preparing for war is an extremely important part of victory, a very important part of winning the war. And I really I credit my wife Leah for teaching me this very important idea and articulating it. We learned it together today. The idea that God is asking us really to do our part. God's going to do God's part. We need to do our part. And we see an example of this, and I'm pulling here from the Bible, and you're welcome to join me in citing this, in researching this yourself. And I'm looking in the book of Chronicles. I'm looking in the book of Chronicles at chapter 32, verse 2. And here is the story of Hezekiah, or in English, Hezekiah. And he is preparing for war. He's preparing for the attack by Sennacherib. And as I mentioned, it's in Chronicles 32, chapter 2. And what's he doing? And it says, and when Hezekiah, saw that Sennacherib was coming, and that he was intended to attack Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes. And what did they do? They stopped the water of the springs which were outside the city. He stopped the water which would otherwise benefit the enemy. Okay, he kept the water in for himself. He does other things too. He builds the great wall, and he fortifies the city, and he fortifies the wall. He prepares. And we move to the next towards the end of chapter 32. If we're looking at verse 20 in chapter 32, and for this, after he's fortified everything, Hezekiah the king and the prophet Yeshayahu, that's the prophet Isaiah, what did they do? They prayed and cried to heaven. So they made a preparation, and then they cried to heaven. Let's move to verse 22. That's chapter 32, verse 22. Thus the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Ashur, and from the hand of all others, and guided them on every side. So we see something really, really amazing happening here, something really amazing, and that's the idea of preparation. That's our part, okay, before the attack takes place, and God does God's part, and together, as my wife Leah says, we have the winning formula. That's the winning formula for success, for victory. You see, the fact is that our strength is in our preparedness, in preparing. And we've just taken a look at Hezekiah, and him together with the prophet Isaiah. They're preparing, but they're also praying. That's what our strength is all about. And this is a reoccurring theme in our history. As a matter of fact, we see it again later on with Bar Kokhba, and the Bar Kokhba revolts against the Romans. And we'll see it again in more modern history with David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion, one of the founders of the modern state of Israel, and when we take a look at his strength, time and time again, it has to do with being prepared. I think that this is a very, very powerful message, especially in light of the Icholov Hospital bomb shelter, and for that matter, anything that we do in Israel to prepare. In a sense, we're not only preparing, it's a security issue, but we're also, in a sense, partnering with God in being victorious, which is what God has promised us. And just a reminder that next week is the Jewish festival of Purim, and we will be doing a special video blog, a special communique about Purim. So please stay tuned, check in with us next week for that very special communique. Thank you, and shalom.